All right, just give it 1 second. Let the broadcast go out on YouTube. People log in that watch it through that, and then we'll get started. Maybe while we're just waiting for those logins to happen, just a little housekeeping, a reminder that I will be going on vacation, and that means that for the rest of the month of June, you have Thursday afternoon, evening off. The next class will be on July 7th. Please keep studying, please keep participating, just keep doing the wonderful things that all of the people who join in this class do. The second thing to remember is that the holiday of Shavuot is coming up. Shavuot is one of my favorite holidays. They all are in their own way. And it is a holiday that doesn't get enough attention because it only lasts for 1 day, in Israel 2 days out.
Yeah.
And that means sometimes people miss it because they didn't even realize that it was happening. So I'm going to tell you now, starting Saturday night and then celebrating through Sunday and Monday, we have the holiday of Shavuot. You can join the Rabbinical Assembly on Saturday night through their YouTube live stream for a special night of study. And of course, you can join us at Temple Israel in person or via our live stream for our celebration of Shavuot on Sunday and Monday morning at 9:30 a.m. Now, because it is Shavuot, I decided to do the class this week on the topic of having an Aliyah. Aliyah technically means to ascend, to go up. It is used literally in the sense that when one goes up to the bima, you are elevated because you're in the higher platform. But of course, having an Aliyah has a more spiritual context as well. The idea of being drawn upwards to Torah. And that, of course, is one of the main themes of the holiday of Shavuot. So it just seems like a very good overlap of time. So let's talk about what to do on the bima, because this can be very nerve-wracking for people. They are afraid of doing something wrong in public. They're afraid of not knowing what to do next. First of all, I should just tell you, that's why we have Gabaim, the attendants up on the bima, who are always on patrol to help people who are having troubles. No one is going to be insulted or upset, and no one should feel embarrassed, especially their first times going up, because it takes a while to get down all the choreography. But of course, doing this class tonight, hopefully you'll feel better prepared and not as nervous that first time. So we read Torah, and we read Torah in a very public way. Of course, we read privately, and again, I hope, as I remind people constantly, you should be doing that every week for the entire parasha. But our public reading, the actual chanting from the bima, from that raised platform, that is something very special. And as we see here from the Mishnah in Masechet Megillah, 3 are called on Mondays and Thursdays, and in the afternoon of Shabbat. Neither more nor less than that number may be called, nor shall any section from the prophets then be read. The one who opens and the one who closes, they bless before and after. So if it is a weekday service or a mincha service in Shabbat afternoon, then we read from 3 sections of the Torah reading. 3 aliyot, as we call them. And those 3 cannot be added to, nor can they be subtracted from. And also during these weekdays and Shabbat afternoon services, we do not read from the prophets, what's called a haftarah. More on that later. Now, this is the old way of doing it when we get to our final line here, of having one person make a blessing at the beginning of the 3, and then another person, the third, make a blessing at the end of the readings. That's been modified over time. Now we have a person make a blessing at the beginning and end of each and every reading. And again, that is something we will expand on, but I want to show you a little bit of the history first. Now those were Shabbat Mincha and weekdays, but on the Feast of the New Moon, what we call Rosh Chodesh, in the middle days of the festival, what's known as Chol HaMoed, 4 are to be called. This number may neither be added to nor diminished, nor shall any section of the prophets then be read. So on Rosh Chodesh, we have 4 readings, and on the days in between, in the beginning and ending of a holiday, for example, the intermediate days of Passover, we also read 4 sections on each day. The first of these would say the blessings before the reading, and the last, who concludes the reading, shall say the last blessing after the reading. Again, like we saw. This is the rule. On all days when an additional offering is prescribed, and which are not festivals, 4 are called. However, if it is a festival, 5 are called, as we will see on Sunday and Monday for the holiday of Shavuot. 6 on the Day of Atonement, also known as Yom Kippur, and 7 on Shabbat. This number may not be diminished, but it may be increased, and a section from the prophets must be read on those days. Now, it doesn't happen very often in our congregation, but there are occasions where you need another Aliyah. You need an additional section to be read so that you can call up an additional person, usually because they have a special honor for themselves or their family. And in those cases, it is possible to divide the readings in order to add extra ones, or even if necessary, to repeat a reading multiple times so that more people will have the opportunity to have that Aliyah. Like I said, this doesn't happen often here at Temple Israel, but it is always a possibility when necessary. And as you can see, perhaps you're most familiar with Shabbat. This is why we have 7 aliyot, 7 readings with 7 people being called up for the blessings each and every Shabbat morning. And why on Yom Kippur we have 6, and why if it's a festival there's only 5, and so on through the others that we've described. You will also be probably getting ready to ask the question, so I'll just head you off at the pass. If it is Shabbat and a festival, meaning they overlap on the same day, then we follow the Shabbat rules and we read 7 readings, which means a normal festival reading, which is normally broken into 5 portions, will be redistributed and broken into 7 portions to fulfill the obligation to have those 7 readings on Shabbat. And yes, you're probably noticing my repetition of the number 7. Absolutely, 7 is considered to be the fullest, completest number, which is why it is the number of days in a week, as well as many other aspects of Jewish life. And of course, for Shabbat, it is very important that we have that number at least as our minimum threshold. As said, we can always go higher than that. All right, so that's a little bit of history about the numbering of our aliyot, and a little bit of interesting history about the origin of doing the blessings. But nowadays, and indeed, I should say nowadays for much of the last 1,000 years plus, there have been some alterations to the custom regarding the blessing and the reading. Whereas it used to be common, and again, I'm talking 2,000 years ago, to be able to find a person who could come up and from memory know the trope and know the right pronunciation of all of the Hebrew for the reading. Over time, it was very clear that fewer and fewer people had that skill without having prepared in advance. And that meant that you could have embarrassment. It also meant that the Torah could be read incorrectly or in a less than beautiful manner. As such, over the last centuries, we have adopted the custom where we will have a reader that has been given the assignment, or rather the honor, of preparing a section or multiple sections of the Torah in advance, giving them a chance to practice and make sure that they have not only the pronunciation, but also the trope, the melodies that go along, which give the flow and sense of the sentence, that they could get that already in advance and not try and do it cold. Additionally, this means that people who maybe cannot read would still be able to participate by doing the blessing before and after each of the sections, each aliyah, as we call them, during the service. So in one way, we've kind of doubled the number of people who potentially can be participating, and also lowered the bar for participation to allow people with perhaps minimal Hebrew skills to still be able to participate and have the honor of being there during the Torah reading. Now, since we only have 7 or fewer on the average Shabbat or holidays and weekdays, then we have to work out exactly who gets those honors. Obviously, the readers are those who are capable, but for the blessing, which is our main focus tonight, who gets the honor of giving that blessing? Ideally, everybody would want it, people shouldn't be so shy. And that means that over time, we have adopted a certain protocol in order to keep the peace, in order to ensure a fairness in this process. Now, the first 3 aliyot are traditionally given to a Kohen, someone from the children of Aaron, to a Levi, someone from the children of Levi, and to Yisrael, meaning the rest of us, somebody that is neither a Kohen nor a Levi. Those 3 would suffice for an average weekday. Now, if you're missing a Kohen or a Levi, there are different rules of how that gets handled. If you're really curious, let me know, and I'll be happy to walk you through it. But there are other people who might be there because we still need to work out how we handle if there is that third aliyah or the additional last 6 aliyot. How do we decide who gets it? And there are certain people who are given priority. A yahrzeit, somebody there on the anniversary of a loved one's passing, somebody there for an ufruf, which is a pre-wedding celebration and blessing, somebody there for a baby naming, for a birthday, preparing for a trip to Israel, returning from a dangerous voyage or serious illness, celebrating an anniversary. There are many different reasons why a person might want to have the honor of an aliyah. These are more traditional ones, but truly, a person doesn't need to have an official reason to want to have an aliyah. Now, if there is a crush of people, we have 20 people who are looking for an aliyah, then yes, we can follow certain guidelines and rules to prioritize certain honorees over others, given the circumstances, the nature of the event, and all of that. But this is not usually a big problem unless you are in a congregation with 1,000 people or more. Most smaller congregations, even of a couple hundred or more, usually don't have too few aliyot in order to be able to accommodate everybody's need. Now, I mentioned that we have 7 aliyot on the standard Shabbat. But if you've paid attention to services, and I'm sure all of you who attend the class have, you'll notice that in addition to those 7, there is another aliyah that is called the maftir, or in our handout that we give on Shabbat, it is marked with a little m rather than with a number. What is this maftir? Well, on Shabbat and the festivals, as I mentioned, we read from the book of prophets, the Nevi'im, or what we call the Haftarah. Now, that reading is very important, and we'll talk about that in just another slide. But because the person who will be reading from the prophets must also show the Torah equal respect, we have to give them an aliyah for the Torah too, in order to make a distinction between their honor and the honor of the other 7, which is mandatory for Shabbat itself rather than just appended because of the Haftarah. That extra reading is put after the Chatzi Kaddish, marking a distinction in the liturgy. And this way, whoever is reading the prophets will also have this extra aliyah, which is known as a maftir. So that maftir is the honor of a person for the person who will be reading the Haftarah. Now, on some special Shabbats and on festivals, this maftir section, which is read from the Torah, will come from a separate place in the Torah. It might come from a place that discusses the sacrifices for that particular holiday, very common for the standard holidays. It might come from a place that deals with a special theme for the calendar. For example, when we were talking about Shabbat Shekalim, we read the section regarding the half shekel donation. On a regular Shabbat, however, with nothing else special in the calendar, we simply reread a final portion of the final aliyah. So we take number 7 or part of number 7, and we read that a second time as part of the maftir. Now that haftarah, like I mentioned, this selection from the book of prophets, we've been doing this for a couple thousand years. Now it was customary a long time ago to read the selection from the prophets, first according to our teachings, because we were under a occupation of a foreign power that prevented us from reading the Torah in public. And so we got around this prohibition by reading from the prophets so that we could technically be in compliance, but still maintain a reading from God's revelation. Now, over time, this was considered so beneficial that even when those edicts were removed, we still continued to read from the prophets. In the original time, the selection from the Book of Prophets, which is enormous compared to the Torah itself, the selection of text would be up to the reader. He would pick a selection that he felt was especially appropriate, and then he would share that as his Haftarah reading. But over time, we sort of developed the greatest hits. That is to say, the selections that matched the theme of the day or the holiday especially well, and those became the standard Haftarot that we use now everywhere. There are still a few differences between the Ashkenazim and the Sephardim, the more Western, Northern, Eastern European Jews, as well as those of Spanish descent or Spanish societies, diaspora descent. But by and large, there is a great deal of agreement on which sections are read for most days. But now we need to get down to brass tacks. How do you actually have an Aliyah? Now that we've talked about the numbers, and we've talked about the why, and we've talked about the Haftarah, let's talk about actually having an Aliyah. And there are basically 12 steps that I want to break out so that we can see how it works. Sounds like a lot of choreography, I know, but trust me, after the first or second time you've done this, it will begin to be very natural, and you'll know exactly where to go and when to do it, and you'll feel the flow of exactly why you're doing what you're doing. And as we're going to see, you're going to approach the bima. There will be a special call for you to come up. There is the touching of the talit. There is the holding of the handles, the giving of the blessing, the holding throughout the reading, reading along with the reader, and then touching with the talit at the end of the reading, holding on to the handles while blessing for the final, and then lingering a little bit before departure. Now, I should point out, and I will point out as we go, there are some modifications to this because of COVID in our current circumstance, but I'll let you know the normal with our COVID modifications so that you can see what changes have been made, hopefully just for a little while longer. Approaching the bima. It is customary to come up to the bima in the most direct route possible. That is to say, you have been called to the Torah. Don't dawdle and take a long route. It is both rude to the congregation, making them wait as you come up, but it is also rude to the Torah that you are not coming in the fastest way possible to come up. Now, every congregation has their own layout, and some of them will have their honorees come up in different places, different sets of stairs or different manners to accommodate the layout. For us, it is customary for a person to approach the table, the Torah table, from on the left side of the Gabbai Rishon, in order that you can make sure that he has your name. Now, during COVID, when a person approaches the bima, they are required to use hand sanitizer. So that way, when this shared space, they will have recently gotten rid of any germs that may have accumulated on their hands. Like I said, usually we have the honoree give the name to the Gabbai, and then the Gabbai will make a special call, which is basically declaring that you have been chosen for this particular honor, whether it be the first, second, third, fourth, or whatever Aliyah, your name is then added. And that is your full Hebrew name. So for example, for me, it's Harav Yehoshua Micha ben Avraham Verut. And for whoever you are, it will be your name, ben or bat, son or daughter, of father's name and mother's name. And if you're not sure what your Hebrew name is, let me know, and I will do the best I can to help you find it. And of course, if you are converting, then you will be choosing a Hebrew name in consultation with me or whichever rabbi you might be working with. Then, before we get to the first blessing, we customarily will touch the Torah with our tzitzit, with the fringes, as you can see here on the screen, that are found at the corner of our talitot, of the prayer shawl. Now, it is customary to take them and sort of tap in the area wherever the reader is pointing to, meaning wherever the reader is going to start, and then to kiss them. This is a common theme throughout many different parts of Jewish choreography, of reaching to the Torah and then kissing it as showing our love and our devotion to it. And of course, using the tzitzit, which are a symbolic reminder of the commandments of the Torah, is a very appropriate vessel for this act. Again, during COVID, we have a little special precaution, which is to say that while we will still gesture with the tzitzit, it is now advised not to touch the Torah, lest you touch a place another person might have accidentally touched, and that you not actually make contact with the tzitzit with your lips. This is not a ritual that needs to have the full physical performance. It is about the kavanah, the intention behind the act, and this little extra precaution to prevent the spreading of germs is advisable. Then during the actual blessing itself, as well as during the reading, you will be holding on to the wooden rollers known as the eitzim that are at the bottom of the Torah. Now, there is some debate about this. Some people have the custom of rolling the Torah together before they say the blessing. However, many, including the Vilna Gaon and other great authorities, say that this should not be done because by rolling it together, it is going to have to be unrolled, and this will delay the reading as the reader has to re-find his or her place on the scroll. So instead, we leave it open while holding on to both handles. At the same time, however, we will look away from the Torah while reciting the blessing. Now, this is done because it is very important that everyone remembers and recognizes and is not misled that the blessing we are about to chant is not found on that page of the Torah, or indeed any page of the Torah. We want to make sure that every word that comes from the reader that is in the Torah's name is actually on the Torah page, and there is no confusion. We have been very, very adamant about this sort of thing for a very long time because we are very aware that other traditions may sometimes doctor their texts, and we want to make sure that that is not the case. So while holding on, we then turn, and the blessing is printed on a card near the Torah in order to make it easy to say. Again, during COVID, we don't hold on to the rollers at this time, but instead simply stand close to the Torah for the blessing. Now, the blessing itself begins with a portion that we call the Baruch Hu. Now, the Baruch Hu happens at many different points in the service, and the Baruch Hu is a call and response, really a call to worship for Judaism. And it is an interactive portion where the person doing the blessing will call out and the congregation must respond, and then the person doing the blessing will continue. This is reminding us that it is a public community activity that is happening here. And the translation of the blessing for reading the Torah goes as follows. The first two lines are the Baruch Hu. Praised Adonai, to whom praise is due, which is responded to by the congregation. Praise be Adonai, to whom praise is due, now and forever. And then the person doing the blessing will repeat that line. Praise be the one to whom our praise is due, now and forever. And then continue. We praise you, Adonai, ruler of the universe, who has chosen us from among all the nations and gave us his Torah. We praise you, Adonai, giver of the Torah. Again, we are thanking God for the gift of Torah and for the gift of being able to be the nation that carries this particular and unique symbol of God's connection to the world. And you'll note that, of course, the phrase in the final blessing is giver of Torah. It is always rendered in this present tense form, the participle, if you will, reminding us that God is actively offering the Torah to us each and every day. This is not something that only happened at Mount Sinai. That was merely the first of the offering, the giving of the Torah to our people. And again, that's what we're celebrating, among other things, on Shavuot. So hopefully you'll be able to review and practice if you've never had an Aliyah, and I'll give you a recording here of how that melody goes. Baruch hu et Adonai hamevorach. And then the congregation responds, Baruch Adonai hamevorach leolam vahed. And then the person who has the Aliyah continues, repeating that same line. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Le'olam Vaed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam Asher bacha banu mikol ha'amim V'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah. And having done so, then the Torah reading will commence. Like I said, it is common for the Torah reader to be a different person than the one who has just done the blessing, in which case the Torah reader will begin by saying Amen to that blessing and then begin reading. If the person doing the blessing is the Torah reader, then no Amen is necessary, for we don't say Amen to our own blessing, only as validation to someone else's. Now, during the actual reading of the Torah, it is customary for the person who has recited the blessing to still keep hold of the right hand roller, at least in our congregation by our layout of our bima, during that reading. This is a way of fulfilling, as we see from the book of Proverbs, it is a tree of life to those who hold on to it tightly. And we are literally holding on to it as a reminder of that. Again, during COVID, we do not hold on. And in fact, after saying the blessing, we will take a few steps back and position ourselves so that we can still see the reading and follow along with it, even though we won't be right next to them. There we are. And we do read along as the reader goes. Now, some of you may or may not be able to read Hebrew perfectly, especially without the vowels and trope on the page, but going ahead and simply trying to follow along best as you can, watching to see where the yad, that's the pointer that is used by the reader to mark the place that he or she is reading from, this is still what should occupy your full attention. After having said your blessing, don't drift off into a dream, don't stare at the roof, don't pick your fingernails, but focus your attention on the reading that you just called others to pay attention to, and which is, of course, that representation of God revealing to us the wisdom we need for that day. So, yes, stay focused on the text. When the reading has finished, we're going to do pretty much what we did at the beginning, which is to say, we will take our tzitzit and we will touch, or in COVID not, the area and then kiss, and then we will hold on to the handles while we say the final blessing. And the final blessing's translation is, we praise you, Adonai, ruler of the universe, who has given us a Torah of truth and planted within us eternal life. We praise you, Adonai, giver of the Torah. And the blessing follows the same melody pattern from the first. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu torat emet, v'chaye olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai, noten haTorah. And again, others will say Amen when you conclude. It is then customary to linger after having an Aliyah, rather than fleeing back to your seat. You stay, moving often to another position in order to make room for the next person with the next Aliyah, the next honor. And then once that person has finished having their full blessing before, reading, blessing after, then begin to remove to your seat. It is customary to shake hands and accept congratulations from the others on the bima or from others that are in the congregation as you make your way back to your seat. Again, during COVID, obviously all of this is currently on pause. Instead, we have our people return back more promptly. Now, during the departure, in addition to picking up the hand sanitizer in our current situation, it is customary to return to your chair in the longest way possible. That is to say, you find a circuitous route in order that you can show that you wish you could stay with the Torah longer. You're not just running from it, but instead you are being pulled from it because you're not allowed to stay up there anymore. While going back, again, it is customary to receive the greetings and well wishes from the members of the congregation. And in our community, the most common way to express your admiration for someone who just had an honor is to say, Yasher Koach. Now, that phrase is an idiomatic expression, but it basically means, may your strength continue. And the usual response when someone has said Yasher Koach to you to respond back to them would be to say Baruch Tiyeh if you're speaking to a man, Baruch Tiyi if you're speaking to a woman, and Baruch Tiyu if you are speaking to a group, following the normal Hebrew conjugation pattern. Of course, if you don't quite remember what you want to say, if the Hebrew has escaped you, then a simple thank you and Shabbat Shalom or Chag Sameach or whatever that day may call for is entirely appropriate as well. Now you're probably thinking, boy, Rabbi, that's a lot of steps. Like I mentioned before, first of all, it will flow very easily once you've done it once or twice. Secondly, remember that each of these steps actually has a spiritual feeling behind it. It is not just a choreography for the sake of easy movement of people on the bima, although it does achieve that, but it is a choreography that allows us to have a mindfulness when we come up for this highest point of the service. Having an Aliyah is considered to be among the greatest honors a person can have, and being mindful, thoughtful, attentive to each of the different steps as we prepare ourselves is critical. Indeed, this is why it is so reminiscent of our preparation for Mount Sinai for the holiday of Shavuot, that it is not enough to simply be present for the giving of Torah, but a person has to be aware mentally and spiritually of what they are about to receive, the words of Torah, and the different stages that we have for this process are there to guide us in that spiritual, that's the right word, it's a spiritual ladder in the process of preparing for hearing those words of Torah. And each time we hear the words of Torah, it should always be special, it should always be beautiful, and it should always be powerful. But just like the words I love you can become routine in too many people's relationships, we need to make sure that we are properly prepared to hear these words and understand the depth to which God did love us, to give us Torah, and continues to love us, to allow us to continue to study, to learn, and to live according to Torah. So an Aliyah is an absolutely amazing experience. If you have been reluctant to have one, or if you are not Jewish yet, but are seeking to become so, then please prepare. Let me know if you need additional assistance and help, or if you would just like to practice in person sometime, and I can help you get ready for this amazing opportunity and experience. Any questions or comments before we wrap up? There's not a lot more to be said tonight. Yes,
Rob,
go ahead.
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead, Regina.
How many times are you allowed to go to the bima?
So for an Aliyah, under normal circumstance, a person will only have one Aliyah a week. So they would not go more than once. There are some exceptional circumstances. If you only have one Kohen and no Levites, you can have a Kohen do two, but that's a very rare set of circumstances. So in general, a person will be called to the Torah for an Aliyah just once per week, but technically you could come every week and have an Aliyah. And if you were part of a very small minyan, maybe only 10 people, then chances are you would be needed to have an Aliyah each week in order to be able to fulfill all of the different 7 points, the 7 aliyot. And having an Aliyah does not prevent you from also having another honor, whether it be Hagba and Glila, the lifting and dressing of the Torah, opening the ark, or other honors that happen during the service.
Okay, good.
Any other questions or comments? All right, then we will finish for tonight. I wish everyone a wonderful Chag Sameach for Shavuot and a Shabbat Shalom for tomorrow. And a reminder, if you missed the very few first minutes of my discussion tonight, I will be going on vacation, and our next Pathway to Judaism class will be on July 7th. Take care, everyone, and be well.
Enjoy